Hello, animators and artists. To celebrate Toon Boom Animation's 30th anniversary, we are hosting virtual studio tours with studios that make exceptional use of Harmony and Storyboard Pro. Joining us for this episode are Marcus Rosentrater, Jared Hickman, and Elisa Shupe from Floyd County Productions. Floyd County Productions is a multiple award-winning animation studio located in Atlanta, founded by Adam Reed and Matt Thompson. Their production credits include work on series such as Archer, America the Motion Picture, and Hit Monkey. So Marcus, Jared, and Shupe, welcome to the stream.
Hey, good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So what is your role at Floyd County Productions, and what does a typical day in your role look like? Shupe, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my role at Floyd County Productions is I'm a lead rig artist. So I help lead a team of rig artists to build all of the characters and props for the shows that we work on. A typical day for us would be to collect all of the designs and turnarounds for characters and props, figure out how we're going to tackle each build since they're all a little different. Even if we have a method for them, we still need to figure out different effects that the designers have applied to the designs and things like that. And we talk with animation to make sure that they're getting what they need from us. And then after that, we dole out the assignments and help the rig artists on our team, get to their priority goals for the week. So.
Yeah, and for productions that use 2D rigged characters, there's a lot of upfront work getting those rigs created.
Yes, there is. There is a lot of technical planning going behind it. We speak with design and animation to make sure that we're getting the right information from design and the right needs from animation to build the perfect build for them to use.
That's so cool. Yeah. Marcus, what is your role at Floyd County Productions, and what does a typical day in your role look like?
Yeah, I'm a producer on the show Hit Monkey, currently in our second season. And for me, the day-to-day broadly is just sort of seeing what the current hurdles are, what's on fire, and working on that. But the actual, what I'm working on day-to-day kind of depends on which phase of the production we're in. So early in production, it might be reviewing scripts, breaking down scripts, hopping into a record, doing team building, working with recruiting to try to hire the department heads. In the middle of production, it might be reviewing some of the early work from our pre-prod team, while also onboarding different vendors, onboarding different teams, and on, just continuing towards the end of production when it's really focused on delivery and are we getting the right specs? Is our episodes passing quality control? What is our air dates? How do we help promote the show internally? What can we help provide for marketing? So it kind of will it will morph as the show progresses.
Yeah, and of those different areas of production, since you have such a wide view of that, what is your favorite part? What part do you find most challenging or interesting?
I think the beginning and the end. I think the beginning, what I really enjoy the most is, getting to kind of have the scripts come in. We get to have a lot of creative meetings, and it's a lot of excitement about what it could be, and you haven't quite hit the reality of what it can't be yet. So it's a lot of dreaming with the team and seeing the potential of it, and then hopping into the records and edit are just some of my favorite parts. Working with talent to get the right things recorded, coordinating that with the showrunners, getting their input, and then diving into the edit. And at the back end, it's sort of the inverse of that. Working with different teams to kind of see that it gets the right amount of polish and on time. And, it's in the middle where I get a little bit lost, when there's 10 episodes in production at once, all in different phases. It's a little, I don't love that part of production as much. I'm probably not alone.
Jared, what is your role at Floyd County Productions, and what does a typical day in your role look like?
Oh my God. right as I start to talk, my cat starts screaming at my other cat. My role is I'm the animation director on currently on this Hit Monkey show that we're making for season 2. So my day-to-day changes pretty drastically depending on what's going on, like kind of like Marcus, but we have an in-house team that does both animates full episodes, but also does retakes animation. And then we work with, we have like studios that we collaborate with to animate our show. So I'm doing anything from working directly with an animator, like a junior animator or a senior animator, like all across the board, and trying to figure out like, trying to help them reach the kind of hit the mark as far as like performance and action and use of screen space and everything. Or I'm working, with supervisors more indirectly, supervisors who are over their own teams and working with them to sort of sculpt out what the vision is for whatever they're handling. So, sometimes I'm very hands-on and I'm doing drawovers and I'm like, doing very heavy artistic assists where I'm like drawing, doing drawovers for every other frame. Or I may be giving more like, here's the vision, here's the idea. And it really just depends on who I'm working with and where we're at in the production. So sometimes I'm opening up Harmony files and retiming in there, and then I send the file back. And sometimes I don't have time to do that. So, yeah, it's very complicated, but there's always something to do. So you definitely don't get bored. But yeah.
Yeah. When I think of like Floyd County Productions and the productions that you work on, I think of a lot of shows that are very like anatomical. Like the characters are very realistic. They're not very cartoony. Do you find that provides like certain challenges when you're bringing our animators onto a production? Absolutely,
yeah. I think setting parameters is like something we have to do when we're making especially with an art form like animation where you can literally do anything. You kind of have to like decide what something is and what it isn't, and then you make creative decisions that change that path along the way. But one thing that one of our pretty consistent parameters is like we tend to make animation for an adult audience, and we tend to take storycraft very seriously, and we tend to take like the stakes of the story very seriously, even if there's a punchline at the end of the scene. And I think using live action and using anatomical character design plays nicely to that. I think there's a million different ways, endless different ways to combine different elements to create a visual, not just visual tone, but an overall tone for a piece, whether it's a film or a short or a TV show. Yeah, we just find that doing that helps us keep things grounded and serious, even when it can be silly and funny. So often we're working not only in-house, but with teams overseas where, they hire their own people, and some of them have drawn, they've done cleanup on Japanese anime, or they've never done anything but tube arm cutout cartoony stuff. And we have to work with everybody. And so my approach is always to like keep as much as I can, and use that as a jumping off point of like, how do we and this first pass of animation and fit it into the mold of what this needs to look and feel like. And story is always just, it's the guiding light. It's like more so than, I try not to get hung up on aesthetics and stuff like that, because ultimately, if you're letting the story guide the visuals, you can get away with things not being perfect and exact all the time. So my life drawing skills are very middling, and that might make me a little bit more flexible with those things. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always learning how to draw more believably. So I empathize with animators who have never done it and who are now on a production where you have to like you have to like sell the inside like ocular cavity of an eye when an eyebrow comes down, and you can't just like shove it down like you would.
I mean, I kind of like that aspect of animation as a craft. There are so many different skills and domains of knowledge you can focus on, you know, like the things that aren't even related to drawing, that I just find really fascinating. So we touched on this a little bit. How would you, like, Jared, how do you describe Floyd County Productions and the type of animation that your studio specializes in?
Trying to move beyond what I've already touched on. I think one really cool thing about, one thing that's like kept me interested in working with Floyd is that most of the time we're not a vendor. We are a major creative partner in the productions that we work on. Obviously, like Archer is something that's like has been completely in-house over the years, which is like, I think that kind of became the model. And so whenever projects that we're launching needed a studio that was really full service, we can kind of handle everything. Like we have staff writers at times, and we do our own voice acting. Like I think Marcus and I have both done voice acting when it was needed. And so that, to me, that is kind of at the core of like how Floyd works. From a technical perspective, like if we're thinking like how we use Harmony, I think something that is specific about Floyd is that we have really built out this sort of hybrid pipeline that is really flexible and changes depending on what we're trying to accomplish and the type of production we're on. Like I can't remember if it was in the pre-interview or while we were actually talking, so forgive me if the audience is like, what are you talking about? But you brought up America the Motion Picture and how like complex those rigs were. So we do stuff like that, but we also, you know, when we have to, we will draw every frame. And we try to use the tools that Harmony gives us to cut corners and make things just easier on ourselves, and also keep things on model. But yeah, we just kind of pick and choose tools and techniques that work for the moment. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say if the way we work is unique or not, because I've been working at Floyd for almost a decade. Don't have that much experience in other studios. I don't know if we're doing it right or not.
So Shupe, from your point of view, on the rigging side, how do you describe Floyd County Productions and the type of animation that the studio specializes in?
I guess I would describe it as, like Marcus said earlier, 2D comedy action animation. From the build's perspective, we try to keep things pretty anatomically like correct. Obviously, like we have fun characters that sort of, you know, push those envelopes a lot, but we try to keep like joints pretty static, so like they look realistic when the animators are using them. And we try to keep like facial expressions like believable, but also pretty like on model to, you know, like life drawing, I suppose. As far as like Hitmonkey goes, that's the project that I worked on most recently. So
no like Adventure Time style noodle arms.
No, no. We try to keep the joints and the, any way the character moves pretty anatomically correct as far as cartoons go, I suppose. So.
Does that give you some like special considerations when building rigs if you're trying to focus on a more anatomical style?
Yeah, so like joints especially, they need to be shaped in a way that like when the knee bends, like it'll look like a knee, whether the leg is straight or whether the leg is bent. In motion, we want to make sure all those joints, like the pelvis and any movable bit in the build, is going to come off looking pretty much right before the animator touches it. The animators do a lot of work with special angles and things like that, custom angles. But we try to get them at least like 90% the way there so they can sort of like visualize what they're trying to do while they're animating it. And they don't have to like put too much work into getting the joints and the movement correct.
And Marcus, from your point of view, how do you describe Floyd County Productions and the type of animation that the studio specializes in?
Yeah, I think Jared had really pinned it down. The action comedy genre. And I think, we also, I know animation is such a wide arena, and so I think it's important to confirm that. Sorry, I'm getting a notification to change my audio. Good, we're gonna power through it. We're in that space where we're making shows primarily for an adult audience, and so that attracts to, I think, our studio and the projects that we work on a lot of like really good voice talent, or voice talent especially that's maybe kind of crossing over from comedy or crossing over from live action. We do work with a lot of voice talent where they're primarily voiceover actors for animation, but it's nice to work on these kind of shows that are kind of premium cable, adult audience, because I think it kind of brings a certain amount of fun for like the crew and for us that gets to record it because of the kind of the talent that it draws in.
A lot of comedy nerds in our
comedy nerds.
They're like, what? We got Andy Daly on this pilot? Oh my god! And everyone's like, what are you talking about?
Shupe, how would you describe your journey to your current role at Floyd County Productions? Like, what's your origin story?
So I was working in Atlanta right when I graduated. I was working at like Bento Box and Awesome Inc. And there came a time where I wanted to try something new, and I had applied for a job in Vancouver on the My Little Pony movie, and it was for rigging, and I had never done that before. And so they took a chance on me, and I moved up there, and I was on the My Little Pony movie. I was on this really great show called Dorg Van Dango, all doing builds. I was on Polly Pocket as well. And that's kind of where it started and where I sort of fell in love with it. I just I didn't really have any idea like how the builds were made before that. I knew that we used them and how to use them, but I didn't know how to build them. So I was pretty excited about that, and I took to it right away, and I really haven't looked back since. I really love builds, and I love the puzzle of it. That's probably my favorite part, is just figuring out how these are going to work and how every angle is going to work with the next, So that's kind of where I started.
And Jared, what's your origin story? How would you describe your journey to your current role at Floyd County?
Oh man, well, Shupe and I both, we didn't go to school together, but we ended up at the same studio in Atlanta. So that's how we've been working together forever.
Yeah.
So I was always interested in art as a kid, and animation, I think, didn't really become exciting to me until I started watching Adult Swim, and I was watching it way younger than the audience is supposed to be. But something about those, even like not getting all the jokes, like it felt like someone wasn't talking down to me, and I liked the idea of being in on a really weird joke. And I grew up with like Monty Python and Kids in the Hall, and I liked weird, absurd stuff more than I liked kind of like very delicate, kind of like Disney animation stuff. But really I didn't decide to go to animation school until I saw Masaki Yuasa's Mind Game, which I don't know if people are familiar with that film, but when I saw that, I was like, it just clicked, where I was like, this is what this is what I want to do. This is insane. How do you do this? And also there was something about the roughness of the style of that film, despite all of its all the masterful all the craft that went into making that movie. I think there was something about it being very wonky and left-handed looking at times that I was like, I can draw this. Like, and I still like my design sense and my cleanup is so crappy and scratchy, and I can't draw perfect, pretty things. And I think when I saw that movie, I was just like, oh my God, you can like make ugly pretty. So yeah, I ended up going to SCAD in Savannah and did the whole 2D animation route. I tried a bunch of 3D stuff because at the time, this was in the early 2010s, I guess. Everyone was saying there's no work in 2D animation, it's dead, and you have to learn 3D. And I was really resistant to it, but I did it because I was like, I don't have any money, and I'm going to be in so much debt, I have to be able to get a job. So, but very quickly I realized that people who were leaving school before I were all getting jobs in 2D television animation. And I grew up in North Carolina in the South, and so moving to Atlanta made a lot of sense. I already had friends here. I had a girlfriend who was from here, who's my wife, and it just made sense. Like there was the TV scene here was like the stuff I was interested in, like Squidbillies and Aqua Teen and all that stuff was like the most exciting stuff to me outside of like Japanese animation. Yeah, it's funny because in a lot of ways that those two worlds kind of came together in Hitmonkey. It's kind of like my sort of TV comedy animation interests and my like crazy Japanese animation interests are all kind of like smashing together. So I don't know. That turned into a tangent. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. I want to ask you, how would you describe your journey to your current role?
It's probably best to spare them. Yeah, I started out with an interest in live action, and I studied filmmaking some in Colorado, and then I moved to Atlanta and kind of got connected with the film community down here, mostly in post-production. And so I had, on a project, I had learned After Effects. It was a project involving a lot of archival material that I was trying to rotoscope out. So I learned the tools that way. And somebody from Floyd County Productions was on that production and said, do you want to test out to be a character animator? And I said, I don't know what that is, but let's try it. And yeah, was able to get in on Archer season 2. And from that point, I ended up, I think, because of my live action experience, I kind of brought in a view on production and kind of different teams coming together. And I think that experience, the combination of some opportunities coming up, just kind of pushed me more into a managerial role. It could have been that I wasn't that good at art, but it was just sort of pushing me towards that managerial role. And I think around season 9, I moved to a producer on Archer, kind of a junior level producer, and it was a wonderful learning experience. I got to sit with the co-EP on that show, Casey Willis, taught me a lot, and then eventually moved over to Hitmonkey in the middle of season 1.
Marcus, in your view, how has the animation
Yay.
industry changed or developed since you started, both in terms of the business and the art?
That's tricky because I have worked at the same place for almost 15 years, and so my day-to-day experience is really a lot of it's all Floyd. But I will say that it seems like if I go back kind of mentally to those late 2000s, 2010, it felt like content being made for adults, animation being made for adults was in much more fringe places. And now it seems like it's almost everywhere, YouTube shows or Netflix things streaming on Netflix. So premium cable now has a lot of shows and content. And I think that's really had a good impact for us. It's given our studio a lot of opportunities to produce more shows. And I think it's maybe probably widened the pool of people interested in creating that from the artist standpoint. It seems like we're seeing a lot more colleges and universities embrace animation as a viable way to make money, and so there's a lot more educational support for animation as well. Even here locally, when I started, SCAD didn't have a campus in Atlanta. They were just making a campus here. And now Kennesaw State is a big one. There's also places like Trilith that are not traditional universities that are launching animation courses. So it just shows that the hunger for animation is really there, and people are interested in getting into the field. So I think that's probably the biggest evolution that I've seen since I started.
Yeah, I would say that Floyd County, in a lot of ways, has been a trailblazer for the sort of action comedy style, like with Archer and other shows that your studio is known for. Would you say that's like a fair characterization?
I mean, that sounded like a pretty good, pat on the back for Floyd. So I'm not gonna argue with it. But yeah, I really think that what Matt and Adam started, and getting that show kind of onto FX and kind of into a new place than where people had seen that kind of animation, and exposing it to a wider audience certainly helped bring more of that attention to Floyd County and more attention to the genre. Absolutely.
Jared, in your view, how has the animation industry changed
what does
since
the
you
audience
started
say?
at Floyd, and both in terms of the business and the art?
Changed since I got into it. Man, I should have looked at this question earlier and thought about it. I think something that was not happening at all when I first got into the industry that's happening a lot now is more, I love animation that's not necessarily focused on the craft. I love animation that's just like funny and not trying to impress people with a spectacle. But I also love animation that is ornate and very handcrafted and very human and has a spectacle element to it. And there wasn't a ton of that being done in television when I first got into the industry. And I think seeing, shows like Castlevania. That show is predominantly animated. It's animated very heavily in Korea, but so much of the creative comes out of that powerhouse team. And I mean, Sam Dietz is like a total genius, and he's animating in storyboard. He's already doing really, really intricate, beautiful animation in the storyboard phase, and there was nothing like that coming out of United States animated television when I first started working. As far as I know, please, someone, I can't see the comments, but if anyone knows of anything. So it's cool. It's just cool to see more variety. I mean, this is really just kind of what Marcus said, more variety and more to people taking animation for adults more seriously. Not only in fringe, weirdo French animation, like the stuff that I was excited about when I was a kid, Sylvain Chomet's films, like Triplets of Belleville. Like, I was like stoked about that stuff, but there wasn't that much of it, and there definitely wasn't anything like high level craftsmanship happening in TV specifically. And I was a TV kid. So it's cool to see those worlds kind of all getting mixed up. So yeah, I think essentially over time the bar has raised, and also like I think we've opened up to more like animation for adults doesn't have to be a cheap sitcom with like reams and reams of like manila envelopes filled with jokes that we've been collecting over the years, and it's like a cutaway. Like, we don't have to do it that way. Japan has been doing this for a long time, but it's nice to see it happening in the United States. Like, story first, but also like highly crafted TV.
Yeah. One interesting thing I just want to pick up on, like you were mentioning that, there's this like really detailed, really like ornate sort of Disney style animation where like every frame is animated by hand. And then you can have like a more spare animation style. Like I'm thinking like in terms of like 90s anime, where you'd see like a cut to a background for like a good solid like 10 seconds as there's like voiceover or something going on.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes that works, Sometimes you can have something that's very spare and economical, and it works with the story you're trying to tell.
Yeah, and I love cutting those kinds of corners in order to save some budget up so you can do something really cool elsewhere in the piece. It's always a balance. One thing that we do in Hitmonkey, like that I think would be obvious to animators, but not as obvious to the audience, is like, obviously we use cutout animation, and we try to use it as much as possible in our dialogue scenes. We need to populate as much of the episode as we can with like mediums and close-ups of characters talking, so we can rely on our deformers to really sell the nuance of that character performance. That's kind of our cutting away to a background pan while someone does a full minute of expository dialogue. That we cut different corners, but it all has to do with the sensibilities that not only our team has built up and has decided these are our parameters, but also the parameters set by the show creators and the network and whoever else we're collaborating with. It all kind of just it's a big stew. But yeah, I love slow storytelling, and I would love to do more of that.
I mean, I think that's super cool. Shupe, in your view, how has the animation industry changed since you started, both in terms of business and art? And I guess from your point of view, like, how have the state of the art of rigs changed?
Well, when I started doing any animation at all in school, I mean, we started on paper, like old school paper, Lightbox. And from there, we were doing animation in Flash, and it was still kind of new at that point. It wasn't like super old. Like Flash was definitely like a class you should take because, not a lot of people know how to use it. There wasn't a lot of tutorials online at the time. And I never rigged in Flash when I was starting out in animation. So once I got out of school, it was kind of my first foray into Toon Boom, where rigging was like center stage for production. Like, this is how you make a character. This is how you do the props. And so it's really interesting to see like this progression of like programs and how Toon Boom like really took over like productions and how it made it like way easier to stay on model. It wasn't, the first animations I was doing, like my first show was Super Jail, which is all like wiggly and like every frame is drawn, and it's different. It's different like every time. Like there would be like color cells missing and stuff in the final like show and things like that. And so getting my hands on Toon Boom is really cool because it wasn't taught in school. It was like just coming out, I think, in 2012, at least for public use. I'm not quite sure on the time there, but in my experience, like I hadn't used it until I was using it professionally, which is cool. It was like, oh, it can do that. Like we were so like enamored with it because Flash had certain capabilities, but Toon Boom really like filled in the gaps that we like needed to make things go like way smoother for sure. So
yeah, there was a point in time where we had like a dozen products. We had like Toon Boom Studio and Toon Boom Pencil Check Pro and Garfield's Comic Boom. There was a lot. But it's cool to see that the tools found a use of the studio that you felt improved the quality of the productions. Shupe, in your view, what kind of challenges are you and the team at Floyd County Productions most interested in working on?
I think we, as builders, really like a nice complicated sort of character to figure out. Like, I know that deformers can be heavy, but like the more deformers, the cooler the animation can get, because you can get like really like pencil drawn looking stuff by just using deformers and multiple angles on those builds, and just figuring out different ways to rig to make the function of the build like way more useful to the animator and way cooler looking in like render view and stuff like that. Like, I think those are the things that we kind of look forward to the most. Just figuring out that big old puzzle that is, useful for everyone in the end.
Yeah, and for our audience, like deformers are tools in Harmony Premium that allow animators to bend and stretch or squash different elements of a rig. Which sorts of deformers do you find that you tend to use the most?
Mostly envelope. Envelope deformers are probably my number one. I don't really use bone deformers that much. Envelope deformers are deformers that go around like the usually outlines of things, or they could be kind of like the freeform sort of deformers where you have like a pattern and you need it to move in a certain way. So you're not exactly outlining it, but you're like putting little anchor points all over it to help you with your animation, basically. But envelope deformers are definitely a favorite for sure.
Yeah. Marcus, in your view, what kinds of challenges are you and the team at Floyd County Productions most interested in working on?
I would go back to the kind of the earlier point we were making, which was about trying to, make the show as economical as possible, but at the same time trying to hide your tracks. And I feel like that's a constant juggle that we have. How do we cheat this really complicated action sequence so that some of it's off screen, but yet we give the audience enough sense for it that we don't have to animate the whole thing. I think we're always trying to find that sweet spot. You know, how do we cut corners but make it not look like we're cutting corners? And Hitmonkey's been a great project for that. Archer was a great project for that. But as it relates to the tools, I think we're always innovating in order to do some of that stuff. And, you know, we've always had a great relationship with Toon Boom about, you know, modifying tools or open dialogue about how do we get some of these things fixed. I can't speak to those because I just learned what a deformer was. But for everyone else, it's been great. No, I do know a little bit, but not that much. So yeah, I think to me, those are always the challenges. How do we make the shows more interesting, more beautiful, but doing it in ways that, you know, are also economical and understand the realities of schedules and the budget. So that's kind of where those are the challenges that I end up facing that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's almost like a triangle in terms of like how complicated are the character designs, how much animation do you want to get out of them, and how much budget and time do you have to make the production work?
Yeah, we had a character. We have a character in this season that I won't say too much about, but it was really hard to find that middle ground, you know, because the show is such a mixture of traditional animation and rig-based animation. You know, there was some thought to say like, well, eventually what we realized is that the rigs will help the traditional animation also. You know, like if an artist had to bring it in just to get to the right pose, you know, because it was such a complicated character that nobody really knew how it moved even. It was helpful to spend a lot of time on that rig, even if we knew that a large majority of the shots of that character would end up being traditionally animated. So I don't know if I'm sure Shupe and Jared know the character I'm talking about. But
Oh yeah,
For sure.
that's sort of how I experienced that.
yeah. Everyone will eventually.
And Jared, number
I
one,
hope so.
what are your cats' names?
This is Cranberry.
Oh.
Very good.
And number
Toad is the other guy. I don't know if maybe he's been walking around in the background. I don't know.
And number two, the less important question is like, what kinds of challenges are you and the team at Floyd County most interested in working on?
I think everybody's got their own sort of like micro interests and like what they fixate on, and that's kind of like what's both a necessity and a cool thing about working on a completely collaborative art form like animation or any filmmaking. Like you really can't. You can't make a TV show by yourself. You kind of can, but you can't do what we do by yourself. And so I think like what gets me excited is just like bouncing ideas off of people and getting a challenge in that I wasn't expecting and trying to find how to solve that problem and do it in a way that improves the story that we're telling, you know, that makes it feel a little bit deeper or a little more interesting or a little bit more unexpected. But yeah, I just I think I'm excited about visual storytelling and really every aspect of like filmmaking in general. I think like I don't necessarily just think like an animator, like I try to think like a filmmaker, and just like working with really cool talented people who can do things that I can't do, or that think very differently than I do, or that have very different. I think it's equally exciting to meet someone or to work with another artist who you have a lot in common with and who you share a lot of interests with and a lot of reference points with, and also to work with someone who like is into stuff that you've never even heard of, and kind of taking all those disparate parts and like making a cohesive thing that feels, you know, kind of like one voice, one tone. Like that's like totally magic, right? Like that people, the general public, when they watch a feature film, they think, oh, like this is a Scorsese film. It's got his imprint on it. Everything comes from Scorsese, and it's like, obviously that's not true. Like, you need every single person who contributes to that film to be engaged and to be doing their job. And like with animation, you know, so much of the frame, we only get so much out of our actors, right? Like, it's just a voice. And that gives us a lot to work with, but we have to kind of make it all. we are faking the audience into believing that these drawings are alive, which is insane when you think about it. So yeah, that's just exciting to me.
Jared, do you have advice for artists and animators who are interested in sending a portfolio to a studio like Floyd County?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to follow up frequently. Often staffing people are overwhelmed with not only their deadlines and trying to fill all of these spots with the right people who are also available and also meet all the requirements, whether it's living in the state that, or being willing to relocate to the state that it's being made in, or whatever it is. There's so many different factors that go into building a staff that's the right staff. And so just don't be afraid to follow up multiple times if you feel like you're right for the project. Also, if you have any information about what the project you're applying to be on is going to be like, especially if it's a second season of something, or if you take whatever context you have about the project you're applying for and really look at your portfolio and also your own interests. And sometimes we're just trying to find a gig, sometimes you just need a job, and that's one thing. But if you're really like interested in working on a production that feels like you are a good fit for, because that's always nice, is when like something is challenging but also makes sense for your style. Do your best to put those pieces that you have that kind of say something about your skill set that lines up with that project. I think that can be helpful for a recruiter. It's just like the closer to the style that you can sort of represent, the better. And if you can't, shoot your shot, bud. Hit us up. We're nice people. Yeah. Just be a good. I think so. There's the whole like LinkedIn and applying online thing, but one thing that like is probably going to get you the gig is living in the city where the gig is, and being a good hang and like just like getting into the community and meeting other animators and engaging with real people in real spaces as much as you can. Like I think all the best gigs I've gotten did not come from applying to a job at a studio where I didn't know anybody. It's always been, whether it's freelance or whatever, all the cool jobs I've been on have been like, oh yeah, I know this really cool artist who's working on this, or, they're pitching this thing, or I've made pilots with friends who, we went to school together. So be as engaged in your local animation community as much as you can. If you live in a place where there isn't much of that, I get it. It's more difficult for sure. So if you have the means and if you have the ability, like, inject yourself into an animation community wherever you are. If you're in Vancouver, or you're close to Vancouver, or near Atlanta or New York, wherever.
Yeah, I'll also say like animation festivals and events are really good for that too.
Totally.
Not just talking to the people who are presenting and talking about their films, but also other attendees who are just in line with you. You should talk to them because you never know what productions they'll be on and if they're looking for more people.
Mm-hmm.
Shupe, do you have any advice for artists and animators interested in sending a portfolio to a studio like Floyd County Productions?
Yeah, so what you said was really good advice, like getting yourself into, not into festivals, but like attending festivals and stuff. Like one of the coolest things that we did in college was go to the Ottawa Animation Festival every fall. And we met so many people there. I think I've even met people in Atlanta, like before I knew them, before I like came to Atlanta. Like I was like, I remember you, like you were also there. It was really cool. So that's definitely great advice. Some advice that I would, personal advice is, if you want to get in, I would learn multiple disciplines. I've been making lateral moves the whole time I've been working. I've been an animator to a builder to a compositor to back to a builder, trying to keep your spot along the pipeline is a really good plan. I think it's worked out for me. So that would be some good advice. And yeah, just send your best work over. Like Jared said, anything that would apply closely to like the project you're trying to get on is really good because we can see your skills more clear that way and like figure out where we could put you. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think one really interesting thing too about like the animation production pipeline is that people don't tend to go to school to learn how to be like composing artists.
Right.
That
Yeah.
tends to be something you learn on the job.
Yeah,
So
it's
like
totally
having
what
an
I learned.
yeah.
Shot my shot on on Archer. I was on Archer as a compositing artist. That was like the first thing. That was the first time I've ever even tried. And luckily, Floyd was like, "Yeah, you have potential. We'll teach you." So yeah, it's really just like kind of figuring out like what you think you could do and just trying, just go for it and see what happens because sometimes it really works out. So.
And Marcus, do you have advice for artists and animators who are interested in sending portfolio to a studio like Floyd County?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add that Jared and Shupe didn't already mention. Definitely, like if you have time, cater your portfolio and your resume to like the gig. If it's a gig you really want, like that will help so much. You don't always know about the project, like Jared said, but if you do, or you at least know like the kind that they're working on, really try to tweak it. I absolutely agree with just like, be building your network outside of just the job postings. You've got to do that. And so all the ways mentioned here were fantastic. I would say the last thing that I can add is that this would be for people new to a studio environment. It is a hugely collaborative space. And so, if in your interview, you're demonstrating that you are used to collaborating, that you can put your own thoughts to the side, adapt to the way the notes are going on a test, for example, that you can show that you are an artist that's both multidisciplinary and can also just like pivot to like, what does the show need? That's what the studio needs most is artists who are willing to trust that someone else has an idea that's better than theirs, or that for whatever circumstances, this is the way the scene needs to go and I'm ready to jump in. So the best you can do to like kind of come forward with like a humble attitude, willingness to learn, ready to jump in wherever is necessary. I think when that comes through, that person seems like a really good hire to me, including the two people on this call right here. So that would be the only other advice I would offer. Just bring that collaborative attitude.
All right. Well, I could ask you questions all day, but we are running out of time. Marcus, where can our viewers go to learn about Floyd County Productions and see more of your studio's recent work?
Yeah, well, head to, I think it's Floyd County Productions T.TV is our website. Floyd County Productions.tv. Yes. That's a great place to see like our demo. What's nice about that is you get to see little clips from stuff that isn't as doesn't have as much exposure. So please go over there and check it out. I think all of Archer is now either on Hulu or on Netflix. Please watch it if you haven't. It's one of the best shows of all time. We made Dicktown, 2 seasons worth of Dicktown. We put a lot of love, heart, and soul into that. So please check that out. America the Motion Picture. And most importantly, just for me, watch Hit Monkey, which is coming out in July 15th, our 2nd season. So you have between now and July 15th to binge all of season 1. Go get it.
Yeah, and if anyone hasn't seen Dicktown, that's the John Hodgman playing a adult child detective. It is a hilarious series. You should watch it if you haven't already. So thank you, Marcus, Jared, and Shupe for joining us for this virtual studio tour interview of Floyd County Productions, and thank you to our audience for joining in and providing questions. Toon Boom Animation just published our new studio showreel, which includes samples from studios like Flying Mark Productions, Yowza Animation, and Boulder Media, as well as amazing indie productions like Carnated Dios, Lackadaisy, and Ramshackle. You can watch it by going to youtube.com and searching for Toon Boom Animation. Also, if you enjoyed this interview, I would recommend checking out our previous interviews with Floyd County Productions on American Motion Picture and Hit Monkey, where we interviewed the crew about their very ambitious and technically impressive work. I just really like the productions that the studio produces. We will be taking next week off, but we'll be back on May 9th with an interview on storyboards and animatics that you won't want to miss. So thank you for joining us, and be sure to tune in next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.